It's never the people in the booth. It's always me. Hello? Okay, perfect. My name is Ana Martinez, and if you speak Spanish, it's Ana Martinez, but rolling the R is like a superpower, so it comes to some, but not to everyone. I go here to City Light, and I also have the privilege and honor of working full-time with Young Life, which means I get made fun of by high school kids for a living. Yes, and a year ago, we got to start Be the Joven, which is Young Life in Spanish. That's literally what it means. But also a ministry that's all in Spanish, which means I get made fun of by kids full-time for a living in Spanish now as well. It means a lot of other things too. It means that I get to see God reflected in high school kids, and it means that I get to learn more about his kingdom here. So just a little bit about myself and why I'm here today. I was born and raised in Augusta County, Virginia, where there are more cows than people. And I had a Young Life leader named Emily Wynn, who was a student at James Madison University and left her context and her culture to step into the hallways of the high school that I went to and befriend me and get to know me. So she got to know all the things that were going on at the high school, and she was there. And it's by watching her show up over and over again that I began to see someone that modeled walking with Jesus. And when I started a relationship with Jesus, she taught me how to open the Bible and read it. She sat with me, she let me ask questions. And when I graduated from high school, I looked at her and I said, "Thank you so much for everything that you've done, and I cannot wait to move on from this. I'm ready for bigger and better. Thanks for everything you've done. Goodbye." And she looked at me and she loved me, and now I'm on Young Life staff, and it's what I do full time. So when I tried to walk away from that, here we are in a full-time ministry role. I went to George Mason University down the street. Go Patriots. We're known for the Final Four many, many years ago. So still holding on tight to that. But when I was there, I went through a new leader training course to learn about what it's like to leave my own context and go into the hallways of the high school. And it's there that I met many students from all over, from different countries, from different backgrounds. But I met many students that looked like me, spoke Spanish like me, and came from similar backgrounds like me. And it's then that I realized that I thought that I had been created incorrectly because I grew up in a town where I didn't see anyone that looked like me, and there weren't people that walked into the hallways that looked like me. So I thought, I believe in God, I know God is good, but I think maybe along the way there was like a mess up in my makeup. And when I walked into the hallways of Falls Church High School, I saw kids that looked like me, and I believed in the gospel for them, which means I believed in the gospel for myself in a way that I never had before. So they taught me, these foolish high school kids who don't know Jesus, taught me about Jesus in a way that I hadn't experienced before. So today, we're going to talk about loving your neighbor, doing cross-cultural ministry, which really just means living our life more cross-culturally, loving our neighbor in this neighborhood, which just right across the street, the high school's down the road. At Falls Church High School, 47% of the school population are Latino-Latina, which means Central Latin America, Spanish. A third of the student body, Spanish is their first language. English, they're learning how to speak English. So loving our neighbor means a lot of different things in this context specifically. So as we learn how to do cross-cultural ministry and live cross-culturally, first, we always have to start with the why. Why do we do the things that we do? What motivates us? What sends us out? And the answer is always Jesus, for most things, for all things, really. But we're going to dig a little deeper into why Jesus, how Jesus, and how it's been written from the beginning of time, and it's what's to come as well. So we're going to start with the beginning, which is Genesis 1. And in the beginning, it says that God created the heavens and the earth. So first, in the beginning was God, and that's important. That was it. We pause there and say that God was in the beginning, and then he created all things. And God said, "Let there be light," and then God saw that it was, what did he say it was? Good, yes, it's like a pop quiz that you already know the answers to, exactly. So God said, "Let there be light," and the light was, one more time? Exactly. And then God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together," and there was water, and there was dry land, and he said that it was good, exactly. And then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, fruit-bearing trees," and God saw that it was good, 100% so far. And then there were living creatures and sea creatures, and God saw that it was one more time. Good, exactly. And then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish, over the birds, over the livestock, over all the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created him. And God blessed them, and he said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over it. And God saw that it was not just good, but very good. Which means the crown jewel, the joy, the big culminating moment. His image bearers are so, so good, more than we understand, reflecting his image. But we know that it doesn't end there. In Genesis 3, sin entered the world. God's image bearer said, I would like to be God, and said thanks but no thanks to God, and turned away from him. And then sin entered the world and infiltrated every pore of our existence and our being. And when God came and said, what have you done? The man said, the woman made me do it, and the woman said, the snake made me do it. And it was God's created image bearers against God's created image bearers. And that is the light of the world that we live in. Then in Genesis 11, fast forward a little bit, the whole earth had one language and the same words. One language and the same words. And as people migrated from east, they found a plain in the land and settled there. And they said to one another, let's make brick for stone and let's use mortar. So they had this new invention, this new utility. And so they built a tower, a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. They said, let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people. They all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do now will be impossible for them. So come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there all over the face of the earth. So there was one language, one culture, one people group, and they were comfortable. They were living there together. And the people said, let us not be scattered. And so they said, God, look at the thing that we've built. Look at the thing that we've done. Isn't this incredible? Aren't we incredible? Still Genesis 3 all over the place. And God used language and scattering not to humiliate, but to humble his people and to draw them back to himself. God said he was going to scatter them all over the place and remind them that he is God and that we need God and his people need God. And then God sent Jesus, the best cross-cultural ministry that there's ever been done. The word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus left his context, left his comfort to come here and live among us. Jesus, born in the poorest of environments in Bethlehem, fleeing violence and sought refuge in Egypt, immigrated and settled in Nazareth, grew as a man with Jewish culture, traditions, and practices. Jesus himself had a culture that he operated within. And using the fullness of his identity, his 100% human flesh, culture, and body, and the fullness of his deity, his 100% Son of Godness, he defeated the sin that separates us, paid the penalty, and defeated death itself, and now lives as a bridge. No one comes to the Father except through Jesus. The veil tore from top to bottom. The system that had kept people away from God, Jesus addressed directly. And then Jesus said to his people, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And today we live in a place where the ends of the earth are at the end of the block, are at that apartment complex over there, where you walk into the grocery store and you hear the languages of the ends of the earth all over the place. And the mandate has not changed, that we will be witnesses in all of those places, but those places are now here among us. So Jesus said, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, in the way that Jesus himself modeled, which is living life together, eating together, doing work together, interacting with the nations, and teaching them everything that Jesus has taught us. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes. First to the Jew, then for the Gentile. Taylor mentioned that earlier. But how will the gospel get to the Gentile unless the Jew shares what he knows? And as a Jew goes, they lay down their privilege, their power, and their influence to go and say, what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as the Savior, and ourselves as servants for Jesus' sake. Mark 10. The Jew gives up his power and authority and enters humbly to serve. So today, we get to ask who in our neighborhood, in this context, is to go, and who is the Gentile. And I think today, if we're in this building, in this room right now, it's us. We're the Jew, and we're to go. And as we look at the demographics of Falls Church and where we live, we look at the 47% of students at Falls Church High School that are Latino, Hispanic, and we say it's them, and it's me. And when Jesus' disciples asked, "Lord, teach us to pray," Jesus taught them, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So we look forward to heaven and what God has promised there, and we are to steward that here on earth. So what is heaven? I won't do that anymore. Make that noise. Revelation 7:9 says, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, and standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne and to the Lamb.'" Oh, can you picture it? Can you begin to see it? Every tribe, tongue, nation, every knee, proclaiming that salvation belongs to God. So that's the why, because one day we will get to see that, and we get to see little pieces of that today with the people that we live around, with the people that live right outside of these walls, with the kids that walk in the hallways of Falls Church High School. And that's why we go faithfully, because we've been sent out by Jesus, because we have the Holy Spirit. And that's why we think about cross-cultural ministry. So with our why, we're going to start thinking about and talking about, and in this workshop, workshopping through how do we do cross-cultural ministry. But first, as we start talking about this, there's some rules. So that we're going to do like a verbal contract of sorts here. So I'm going to give you the rules, and then if you think you can abide by them, then we'll do I will abide by them. Does that sound good? Perfect. Okay. So rule number 1, we will mess up. You will mess up in big, big ways. You will say the wrong thing, you will do the wrong thing, you will offend someone. In your passion and your not knowing, you're going to hurt feelings along the way. It doesn't mean that we seek to do that, but it means that as we enter outside of our context and into someone else's context, we're going to mess up. And we need to lean into that because His grace is sufficient to carry us through that. But that means that we need Jesus' grace because we will mess up. So rule number 1, say it with me, we will mess up. Ready? We will mess up. Perfect. Okay, rule number 2, you must be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Cross-cultural ministry means you're literally crossing from what you know into what you don't know, or something that's new. So we must be comfortable in being in situations where we're no longer in the know of everything. What Nate was talking about earlier, not knowing where to go, not knowing what words to use, not knowing how to communicate. We must be comfortable with living that in our new reality. If we are to love our neighbor, we're going to go to where our neighbor is, which means it's outside of our own living room, which means we're not in control of that space. So we must be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Rule number 3, I call this the unicorn rule. We can change the wording if anyone has any other ideas later. But we must be students and teachers both at the same time. That means that we must be learning about others' cultures and experiencing others' cultures and acknowledging that we don't know everything, so we're learning. And as we're learning, we're turning back and we're teaching our own community about what we're learning and what we're experiencing. And the last rule, rule number 4, we must listen. Jesus listens so well. We must learn to listen to people from other cultures and other contexts. As we step into our neighbor's neighborhood, we must learn to listen to their stories, to their experiences, to what they're saying. Listen not just to set ourselves up to ask another question, or listen not just to try to figure out what to say next, but just listen. And that is much harder than we think that it is. It means dying to ourselves. It means not thinking about what we're going to say next as we're hearing what someone is saying. So if you think that you can abide by these rules, take your right hand, put it over your left heart. Perfect. And say, I. State your name. Perfect. Do promise To mess up? To be a unicorn? To listen and learn? And teach along the way. Amen. I don't know, maybe that was sacrilegious a little bit. We'll cover that later. Okay, so free yourself from needing to know everything at all times as you enter into a different culture. You will not know, and you will be uncomfortable, and you will make mistakes. And that is why Jesus has given us the ministry of reconciliation to himself, because we go and we say, God, I have messed up. And then to one another, we go to that person and say, I think I've messed up, or we receive that from someone else. So now that we know that we're going to mess up, we're going to do a lot of different things. In order to cross into someone else's culture, to experience someone else's culture, first we need to be aware of our own culture, what we're coming from, who we are, our own identity. So you guys each have 3 pieces of paper somewhere around you. If you don't have one, James is in the back and has some extras. Perfect, nailed it. So we're going to be looking at the one that says hot climate cultures and cold climate cultures. So all people operate within one of these climate cultures, and there's some mixing in the U.S., north-south cultures. There's a little bit of mixing in all of these, but typically people operate in one or the other. And these are just different ways that cultures communicate. We literally communicate in different ways, not only with language, but with customs, traditions, with different things. So this is all based from the book Foreign to Familiar by Sarah Lanier, and she just talks about the ways that different cultures communicate. And I'm going to run through some things really fast, but you have this piece of paper with the definitions that are worded much better than the way I'm about to say it. So some characteristics of hot climate cultures. They're very communal or collectivistic. So hot climate cultures, which typically are also centered around geography, like the warmer the climate, you're more considered a hot climate culture. In the book, she talks about like agrarian culture and how that was a part of it. But Mexico, Central America, South America, these are all hot climate cultures. The U.S. is a cold climate culture. And again, there's like some distinction throughout, but for the most part. So hot climate cultures, some of their characteristics. They are very communal, very collectivistic, more of a group identity. Cold climate cultures are more individualistic. This is what I think, this is who I am, more individual. Hot climate cultures, communicate radically different. This is going to be key. This is going to help all of us so much. Hot climate cultures are more indirect communicators. So, for example, this happens often in the Latino community. If you go over to someone's house and they say, would you like a cup of coffee? Even if you really do want one, you say no. And then the host knows that that means yes, and they give you a cup of coffee anyway. Easy, right? Got it. But it's because relationship is the focus. So we're taught, my mom taught me, you do not burden your host, so you say no, but because they love you and because the hospitality is key, they will give you a cup of coffee anyway, and more than you ask for, and then you drink a lot of it. But in a cold climate culture, it's more direct communication. So you go over to someone's house, and they say, would you like a cup of coffee? And you don't want one, so you say no, so you don't get one. Okay, that makes sense in a lot of ways. But you see how there's a little bit of a tension there. If you don't know that, then either you feel insulted or you feel thirsty at the end of the day. So, very key. All right, different hot climate cultures. There's a different sense of time. It's people versus time. Cold climate cultures are very task-oriented. Hot climate cultures are very people, relationship-oriented. So for example, a trip to the grocery store. Let's say it takes 30 minutes. In a hot climate culture, you leave your house, you see a neighbor, you stop and you chat for 30 minutes. Then you get in the car, you go to the grocery store, you see someone else, you chat for another 20 minutes. You come back, you see another neighbor, you chat for another 15 minutes. So a trip that was going to take 30 minutes took whatever that math equals, let's say an hour and a half. But in a cold climate culture, a trip that takes 30 minutes takes 30 minutes. You leave the house, you see someone, but you're on your way to the grocery store, so you wave hello, get in the car. You see someone at the grocery store, but you're focused on the task, so you still get what you need and then get back in the car. So 30 minutes takes 30 minutes. Relationship versus task. Neither is good nor bad, they're just different. That's why a lot of people are late often. So different concepts. And there's a lot of different things here on this piece of paper, so read it over. If your brain works this way, information notes, this is incredible for you. Okay, I threw a lot of information at you, so now we're going to play a game and see what you guys know. Are you ready for this? I'll take the silence as a yes. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna give you some scenarios, and you're gonna tell me if it's a hot climate culture response or a cold climate culture response. So your two options for answers are hot or cold. So you get to yell hot or cold. That's kind of fun, right? Okay, so here's scenario number one. You had planned a dinner with a friend that you haven't seen in a year. They come over, you're chatting, you're catching up, big news, and then there's a knock at your door. It's another friend that you see all the time. They say, hey, I was just in the neighborhood. Can I come in and hang out? And you say, no, I'm sorry. There's this friend who I haven't seen in a year and we'd planned to meet, but thanks for dropping by, maybe we can hang out later. And you close the door and they leave. Okay, was your response cold climate culture or hot climate culture? So yell out hot or cold? Cold, 100%, you guys are great at tests. Yes, that's a cold climate culture response. It's not unkind, but it is direct communication. It's task versus relationship, when that task was a relationship. Okay, so the person that shows up, knocks on your door, unannounced, was just in the neighborhood. Was that a hot climate culture action or a cold climate culture action? Hot, yes, they showed up, they didn't ask, they just were in the neighborhood. Very much a loose sense of planning and loose sense of time, just showing up relationship versus task, exactly. Okay, Jesus is on his way to Jairus. His daughter is sick and dying. He's in a crowd, and he feels something happen, and then he notices that there's a woman, and he sits there and listens to her story and engages in a miracle and heals her from her bleeding for 12 years. Is his action hot climate culture or cold climate culture? Hot, exactly. He was on his way to a task. He saw a person, a relationship. He stopped where he was going, spent a lot of time here, and was very late to the other thing. But yes, hot climate culture response. Okay, another scenario. Jesus and his disciples are tired and exhausted. They've been working so hard, they go up to the mountain, and then a crowd follows them, and there's 5,000 people, and they are so hungry. The disciples say, send them off, we've done our job, we're exhausted, and we don't even have the thing necessary to complete the task. Jesus says, you feed them right now. Was the disciples' reaction hot culture or cold culture? Cold. You sounded less sure, but you were very right still. Exactly. What about Jesus' reaction, hot or cold? Hot, yes. The people, he saw their need, he engaged with them. He didn't even necessarily know to have the things that looked necessary to complete the task, but the people were there relationship oriented. Again, neither good nor bad, just different. And as we communicate, another example, and I'm not gonna ask you, I'm gonna tell you the answer. So the quiz is over, you all passed, congratulations. You made it on to the next segment. So when we started Vida Joven, it's all students from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and we started something called Vida Joven after school, so it was a school club. I would see kids during the day and say, hey, are you coming after school today? And they would say, oh, yeah, I'll be there. And then we'd show up after school and that kid wasn't there. It's like, this kid lied to me. How dare he? And then I'd see him the next day and I was like, well, hey, why weren't you there? And he was like, oh, I wanted to be there. And so then I come from a hot climate culture. Like, that's how I communicate too. It's really hard for me to say no. So if you ask me something and I don't say no, I might mean no, so ask me again. But as I remembered how different cultures communicate, I realized that he was saying, I want to be there and I value your relationship, but I can't be there and I'm not gonna be there. So then that shifted the way that I interacted with that student from, you lied to me, to we communicate differently. And then from then on, I was like, hey, are you actually gonna be there or not? Because I need to know because of food count. And he was like, I'm not gonna be there. So it just changed the way that I ask questions. Or when we serve meals at Vida Joven, for our first thing that we did at the Providence Rec Center, which some of you guys were at, we would tell kids, hey, it's a buffet line, go help yourself. And they're like, no, we're fine. No. And so then I was like, well, I know these kids, I'm hungry, they're hungry. Like, the high school boys eat more than I do, and if I'm hungry, they're definitely hungry. And then I learned, because of the indirect communication, from now on, we will just serve plates and take it to them. It's a way of showing hospitality. In my culture and in my communication, it's different, but I can shift the things that I do to cross-culturally into their world and meet them where they are. Okay, so now that you guys are experts in this, we're gonna move on to the next thing. Does everyone feel like an expert? Perfect, yes. Oh, I said I wouldn't make that noise again. And I made it 3 times. Okay, so now that we understand that cultures just communicate differently in general, we can understand a little bit more about our own culture, our own experience. And thinking about the demographics of this community, it's important for us to know how we view ourselves and then how we view other people, other cultures, specifically the Hispanic Latino community. So there's 2 terms. Hispanic means deriving from Spain. Latino means Latin America. There's Latinx, which covers the variety of different cultures within Latin America. So 3 different terms kind of mean the same thing. Ask people which one they prefer, because each person will have a different answer. So just another thing that makes it another thing to note. So your second sheet of paper, there's a gingerbread man in the middle, or woman, a ginger person in the middle, and there's boxes all around. So this is the self-context exercise. And what we're going to do is figure out a little bit of the different factors that influence us and teach us and how they shape us to think about ourselves and people. So each of the boxes has 2 different columns, from birth to high school and from post-high school to present. And I'm going to use myself as an example, and then this is going to be your heart work. That's what we call homework when we make it sound fun. Still, high school kids don't do it either way, but you guys will. So this is going to be heart work for later, just to begin to understand yourself and your context in the way that you interact or think about others. So each of these different factors are things that influence us: our hometown, our family, school, church, work, and entertainment. Entertainment is books, movies, podcasts, music, what else? Anything that falls under the entertainment category. So in the left-hand column, you're going to write down how all of these things taught you to view specifically the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community. So for example, I was born in Fort Defiance, Virginia, in Augusta County, and in that community, we were literally the only Latino family, which means I was taught by what I saw around that there weren't many people around in general. When they were talking in the panel about seeing yourself represented in different levels of authority, I didn't see anyone that was a teacher that was Latino or Latina. I didn't see a principal. I didn't see anyone at the bank. I didn't see anyone other than my parents. So then I learned to see myself really not anywhere other than in my family. Entertainment. All the movies that I watched that had people that looked like me in them were maids or they were working in a restaurant. So I internalized that people that look like me work in those jobs. And those are great jobs. Those are actually the jobs that my parents worked in. So that was reinforced. So then when I went to college at George Mason University, go Patriots, they're not paying me to say that. When I went to college and I started to interact with people that looked like me on my same level, it was kind of earth-shattering in a way that I didn't understand. I'd never seen someone that looked like me go to college. I didn't have friends that looked like me go to college. And then I worked in an internship with kids from other countries, from Peru, Bolivia, Uruguay, that were working in their state departments and came to learn about government here. And it's the first time that I saw someone that looked like me that I knew was going to work in a job other than as a maid or in a restaurant. And that shattered my worldview. I didn't know that that was possible until I saw it. And I think I knew it in my head, but it's different to know it in your heart, and it's different to see it out there. So for when you take this home, how did all of these things teach you to view Latino people? Did you see them in any of these levels? Use adjectives, use words to jot down some of those descriptions. And then something important that we need to recognize, from birth to high school, we have little autonomy in the choices that we make. So we don't choose where we're born. We have no say in that. We're born into our family. The schools that we go to are typically in our neighborhoods. And then the shows, movies, TV, whatever we watch for entertainment are chosen by our parents. So for most formative years, we had no autonomy. We didn't know to look for different things. So we were shaped in these years by all of these things. So what did these things teach you about the Latino community? And then from post-high school to present, we have more choice. So maybe some homework, some heart work, if you turn to the back, to continue evaluation and then to add in something to diversify our bookshelves, our movies, like they were talking about earlier. So the last 5 Christian books that you read, this is what Danielle was talking about. are you hearing voices from only one community in one context? And if your desire is to do cross-cultural ministry in the Latino community, then who do you know, who are you reading, who are you listening to that looks like the people that you desire to go to? Because when they look at you, they're gonna see you and think that's what a Christian looks like. But if you can bridge them to someone that looks like them, they will grow beyond anything that you could imagine. So this is like an evaluation, but not pass or fail, just knowing who are you reading right now, what's their demographic, and if the Latino community is the one that we're entering into, then who do we need to add in so that when kids look at us, when our neighbors look at us, when adults look at us and say, but can I only know people that look like this, that follow God, so what does that mean for me? Then you can say, read this, or share what you've learned from someone that comes from that cultural context. Podcasts, movies, the list could go on, but I think these are some of the most formative ones in our lives. So there's that. And that will just give you a good understanding. It will start to shape you. One of the biggest things that we need to realize is that if we don't see people in authority that look like the people that we're going into the communities, we're going to serve down to them because we've never seen them in authority. And that is just harmful, and it's image bearer not valuing the fullness of another image bearer. So if we start to learn from people in authority, and we can picture, when we interact with these students, we can view more for them. They will be the ones that are binding the broken hearts in their communities. They will be the trees of righteousness that are planted in their communities. They will be the ones that are bringing the gospel to their communities because you first went and saw that and believed in that for them. Okay, now that you guys are experts in that, we're moving right on. And I say that, but this really is lifelong work. So it's the beginning of lifelong work. You will never be experts in any of this. We'll always be learning. I am always learning in all of this. So then, knowing the context that you're entering into, your last sheet is hierarchy of Hispanic values, hierarchy of American values. The gospel does not change anywhere. The gospel is the same. We're all sinners. Jesus came and paid that penalty for us. He defeated sin and death. He reconciled us to himself. Through relationship with him, we have access to God, and there is kingdom come. So that doesn't change anywhere. But we do get to contextualize the gospel. So for example, one high school, many different cultures. To my American high school kids, when I'm sharing and contextualizing the gospel, so many of the conversations I'm having are related around success and identity and performance and work. You don't have to take 7 AP classes to find value. If you fail, the Lord sees more than you than just that failure. Your performance does not create your identity. It's contextualizing God and the way they experience God in their own context. With our Latino community, we use the language of family, of adoption, of refuge. With our undocumented students, you're a foreigner in a foreign land. God will bring you into his kingdom. There's a seat for you at his table. For people that are hungry, for students that experience such deep resource food needs, one day you will sit at a feast table and you will not eat to survive and survive only, but you will eat to feast and as an act of worship. Do you see how the way that we share the gospel changes depending on the context? Not the gospel. The gospel itself does not change. It is the same, but we contextualize it to meet our kids' deepest need. It's all the same, that they will be in the family of God, but the way that they experience it is different. So we need to learn about our community and what that means. So this sheet right here is just some helpful different values in different communities. You are going to be more familiar, for the most part, with the American values because it's what you've grown up in. It's what you've learned. Some of us are going to be more familiar in the Latino values. It's what we've grown up in. It's what we've learned. But we need to know what we're fluent in to be able to learn what we need to grow in. So you can use this just to understand a little bit more. As always, there will be more questions than answers, I think. And as you listen, as you make mistakes, as you are comfortable with being uncomfortable, as you go where the Lord has sent you, as you turn to your neighbor and love your neighbor, which means more than just showing up once or twice, it means really living life with that person. It means longing for them to know the good news. It means sharing Jesus with them in the way that they understand. It's going to cost us so much. It's going to cost us being comfortable. It's going to cost us our lives. We're going to lay down our lives as we go. And we're going to hear different stories that will make us long for Jesus in a way that we've never longed for Jesus before. As we cross into specifically the Latino community, and just thinking of students that I get to interact with, hearing their stories of the experiences that they've had here, of the fear that they've lived, of the violence that they've seen, of the things that they've become numb to. It's going to cost you so many things. It's going to cost you thinking that you are a Savior and you are God. Because kids are going to say to you, parents are going to say to you, adults are going to say to you, peers are going to say to you, I got used to seeing dead bodies on the street of my country. I got used to that. And you're going to say, there is nothing that I can do about that. But one day, in the kingdom of God, there will be glorified bodies, and that will be bound. And you're going to hear students share with you that they're meeting their parents for the first time and that it's not going well. And you're going to say, I can't do anything. I am not God. I cannot do anything about that. And you're going to long for God's family. You're going to understand that. You're going to long for that in a way that you haven't before. You're going to experience the longing for kingdom come, for them and for yourself. And as it costs you everything, as it costs you your comfort, you're going to gain an understanding of God that is so full and so rich. And along the way, you will experience God's family in ways that you didn't know were missing, and the plates of food piled high, even after you said, no, I'm full 3 times, but they just kept piling the food on because that's the hospitality that we get to experience. And when we give the people the tool of the gospel and they know, gosh, how much more full will that be when we get to experience that together. You're going to experience God's fullness and generosity and cariño that you didn't think possible here and now. And you will marvel at God's image bearers, and you will fall more in love with God as they fall more in love with God. You will see the miracles that he does in ways that are beyond just our own context. And one day, we will get to sit in this room. Everyone that's in this room will get to sit in heaven with people from our neighborhood together. Oh, and what a glorious day. But until then, we get to work and walk together into the neighborhoods to love our neighbors. And we get to hear the lament and know that in that, God's promise is louder. That because of the lament, we get to fully understand God's promise of joy that is to come. And you will make mistakes, and you will many times say, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if it's me. And then you will hear the words of Jesus in ways that you never have before. Come to me, all you who are weary. And he will take his yoke. And it doesn't mean that the work is done and the yoke is gone, but it means that Jesus will carry you to it and will carry you through it. So City Light, I'm so excited to get to do this with you, to learn, to make mistakes, and to experience God's will and God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. Thank you.